Let's make a 3-color chunky knit blanket in Christmas colors using Yarn Bee's red, olive, and white chunky yarn. I chose to start with the white yarn. Take your working yarn in your left hand and wrap around to make a slip knot. This is your starting point. I gauge it to be about 2 fingers in the loop. Set it knot side down and you'll begin making your chain foundation. Your chain foundation is the base where you add on your stitches. If you'd like to come see my video explaining the slip knot and chain foundation, come check it out. Your last stitch on the chain is an open end loop. You'll count 23 stitches on your chain, then flip it over. The middle bump is where you will be knitting, but first take your end stitch and bring your working yarn down and through and then up, making a knit stitch. Move your working yarn to the left. Take your finger through the middle bump, grab the working yarn and pull it through using your thumb to lift it up into a loop. You should be able to gauge it with one finger in the loop. Continue making your knit stitches, making sure the loops touch. There is a middle loop next to the knot on the left that you don't want to miss. Now you have your left end tail, working yarn, and your chain foundation open end loop with your first row of knit stitches. You're now going to introduce the red yarn to the left side of the blanket. Both the white and the red yarn are on the left side. The red working yarn goes under the white yarn, and you're going to tie a knot around the white yarn behind the end knit stitch loop. Make sure it's tight enough and cut the excess. The red yarn is now attached, and you can continue making your knit stitches across this row, gauging the loop sizes as you knit. You can see the back stitches run across in a different pattern. Coming to the end of this row, you're going to make a right bottom corner, bringing the red yarn down to the white end loop, pull it up, and making a knit stitch. The red working yarn is on the right now. Introducing the third color, you're going to take the green and wrap around the red, making a knot close to the knit stitch loop. Cut the excess yarn close to the knot. This is on the right side of the blanket. Now your green yarn is attached, and you will continue making knit stitches across this row, going left. Your working yarn is on your left as well. At the end of this row, you will take the white working yarn and bring that under the green yarn, make the knit stitch loop, and loop it through, making another knit stitch. Your green working yarn is on the left as well as your white left tail. Continue making knit stitches across this row. So after making the end stitch, you will take your red under the white and behind the knit stitch and pull through, making another row's knit stitch. This is how you will continue adding rows on each end. Remember, the yarn you bring up to the next row goes under the working yarn and up and behind the knit stitch loop, just as this green yarn is moving up. So you can take your time making your knit stitches so you don't skip them, and you can gauge all of the loops evenly. You can see now how the pattern is forming. You'll notice the chevron-like pattern that is on the front side of the blanket. And on the back side it has a different pattern and border. Eventually you'll run out of yarn, so you'll need to attach yarn together. Use the lighter to connect the yarn. Check out my video explaining the lighter method. I like this method to avoid knots in the middle of the blanket. Since I started with white yarn, I'm going to end with white yarn. When you get to the length of your blanket, you'll want to use the white yarn to finish the border. This last row of knit stitches are gauged at 2 fingers. Make sure you have at least 3 blanket width strands of yarn to cast on your border. Sandwich the 2 end knit stitches together and pull the working yarn through the right to the left loop and pull through, making a knit stitch that you'll then pull over to the next one. Continue sandwiching the next stitches, pulling the working yarn through and creating a loop that pulls over the next stitch. You are making your top chain border. When you come to your last loop, cut about 6 inches of working yarn. The last end loop, you'll pull the working yarn through and down, tightening the loop. You can weave the end into the chain border. You can cut the excess of the red working yarn and light the ends and attach to the yarn. You can do the same with the green yarn on the left. I just hold it in place until it cools. Take the white bottom left tail and tie in a knot and then weave it into the chain foundation. This blanket I would wash gentle and air dry. And voila, you're done! Happy chunky yarn hand knitting! Merry Christmas from Cobble Creek Lane.